Now, the Southern African leaders at this weekend's SADC Summit called for the West to lift sanctions against Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe and his inner circle as they gave their seal of approval to his victory in the disputed elections. Shurima Hangari is the head of South African Foreign Policy and Africa Drivers Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, and he joins me now to unpack the regional dynamics that are at play. Now, Shurima, thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thank you.
The most astounding thing that came out of this weekend's meeting for me was the appointment of incoming President Robert Mugabe as the vice chairman of SADC. Should we understand this to be the biggest endorsement that he can receive from the group in light of the outcome of the elections?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's important to look at the SADC processes in two ways, as far as Zimbabwe is concerned. First, the period before the elections, where SADC was a bit concerned, a bit worried as to whether the elections would be peaceful, whether the elections would be in flagrant violations of the SADC Electoral Code of Conduct. It appears as if the SADC Electoral Observer Mission validated the election. Mugabe's victory was validated. So for SADC, it's now business as usual. And therefore, we should look at Mugabe's appointment as vice chairperson of SADC as that type of legitimization of a leader who was, in the eyes of SADC, has been elected by its people.
There's a lot of credibility at stake here, not only for SADC, but also for Jacob Zuma as the president of South Africa and one of the lead mediators or negotiators now in the Zimbabwean situation, given the international a lot of international players saying that these elections, in fact, weren't free and fair and they weren't credible at all. Now, we also have President Banda at the weekend, or incoming President Banda at the weekend, saying that SADC is actually impressed with the elections coming out of Zimbabwe. What are your insights that you can share with us about the implications for credibility for all the different stakeholders that are voicing their opinions at this time?
Well, I think it's a bit worrying, especially when it comes to President Joyce Banda to use such terms when it comes to the electoral process in Zimbabwe, which clearly has been contested by the main opposition parties. So for her for SADC, for her as the new voice of SADC to say that they are impressed with the elections, I think it casts some aspersions on SADC as a body that ought to be a custodian of good governance in the region.
There's been quite a number of vocal voices coming out of Zimbabwe saying that her statements really is putting SADC as a breeding ground for dictators. Do you think this is a bit sensationalist, or there's some merit in some of those statements?
I think it's a bit extreme to put it that way, but what is clear is that SADC wants to close the chapter on Zimbabwe. It has been on the agenda of SADC for well over 10 years now. So I think the last election really was a point for SADC to see how it can close the chapter, and with the region validating the election, including those who had initial objections, the president of Botswana in particular. I think it appears as if SADC wants to close the Zimbabwe chapter and move on to other issues. And in particular, my view is that even the appointment of President Mugabe as vice chairperson is a way of trying to legitimize the leadership of President Mugabe.
What does this mean, though, for South Africa with regards to its relationships, its diplomatic relationships in particular, with the voices that have said that these elections are not credible?
I think President Zuma took a decision immediately after this election. He congratulated President Mugabe on an election that he feels that President Mugabe won squarely. So for South Africa, the matter is closed, and whether the international community or certain sections of the international community will contest that view or not, I think is neither here nor there.
We also saw, of course, the MDC rallying up support through a number of regional bodies, taking a trip to Lilongwe ahead of the summit to try and mobilize support against the endorsement of the elections. Given that the body has come out very clearly endorsing the elections, what implications does this have for the MDC and its relationship with SADC, if it still has any?
I don't think SADC would, as a body, or I think it's important to emphasize the fact that the politics of summitry at the SADC level is about elected heads of states. So MDC, in that case, is a political party that is trying to express its voice around an election that it feels was illegitimate. But at the end of the day, SADC endorsed the election. So I don't see how or what impact the lobbying would have in terms of the actual situation on the ground, in particular the election of President Robert Mugabe. Nothing is likely to change around that. If we
look forward a little bit and we realize now that the MDC, of course, has withdrawn its case against ZANU-PF from the courts, what is the image that one gets from MDC? Is this a sign of giving up, or is it a sign of saying that from a vantage point of credibility, they seek no longer to pursue with this case? What should we understand from their withdrawal?
I think it's important to note that MDC wanted to get some documents from the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission, and they felt that these documents were important when it comes to consolidating or developing their case or their electoral challenge. So that those documents did not come. The ZEC did not provide those documents. So I think the calculation that the MDC made is to say that if we pursue the legal challenge without those documents, I think we are likely to lose more.
Shruma, earlier, before the elections, you sat in this very chair and we had a discussion about the EU's outsourcing the observing of the missions to SADC, and really saying that should SADC declare these elections as free and fair, they would consider lifting sanctions from Zimbabwe and from President Mugabe and his inner circle. Is this what we should be anticipating now, that the sanctions should start to be lifted, or is that process already underway?
Well, I think in light of the positions that the EU expressed when it comes to the credibility of the elections, I find it very hard. I think it's going to be very difficult for the EU to lift the sanctions in the immediate future. I just don't see how they are going to do that in light of the concerns that they express. So for the EU, it's back to the drawing board. And it's true that the EU hoped that the elections were going to be credible, and perhaps the loser would accept the outcome. But in this case, we didn't have that type of ideal scenario. It has been a disputed election, and the EU is now going back to the drawing board when it comes to Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. Let's leave it there this evening. Of course, that was Shirime Hengari. He is the head of the Southern Africa and Policy Program at the South African Institute for International Affairs.